Hey everybody, welcome to this webinar today. I'm here in Copenhagen at the Concordium office, and today we'll be presenting to you ConcordiumBFT that went live on mainnet a couple of weeks ago. My name is Sharan. I'm the product manager for the core blockchain team here at Concordium, and with me here in the studio, joining virtually from Switzerland, I have Christian. In the next 30 minutes, we'll walk you through what ConcordiumBFT is about. So this upgrade of the protocol is an amazing accomplishment for us because in general, updating the consensus protocol of a blockchain is no minor feat and is fraught with a lot of dangers. And we've managed to pull this off in an extremely seamless manner without any downtime and glitches. So in this talk, we will run through the general evolution of the Concordium consensus layer, talk about what the benefits it brings are, and then show you how it works at a high level, run you through some of the results that we have seen and some comparisons with other chains out there, and then have a live Q&A interaction session. So then let's dive into the presentation. So to begin with, I think it's just nice to have a quick refresher of what a blockchain consensus is. Blockchain being a decentralized system, as it has at its core as the consensus protocol as the crucial component that ensures that transactions are processed securely and that the entire network reaches agreement on the order and validity of the transactions. So the choice of the consensus mechanism has a profound impact on the blockchain's performance, usability, and security. So with this in mind, when Concordium set out a couple of years ago on this blockchain journey, there was a lot of thought put into how we built the chain, keeping in mind that we wanted to maximize both security as well as usability. So and usability in the context of blockchain consensus means that you have fast finalization and confirmation times. So to solve this problem, so initially we had a dual layer set up. So there was a Nakamoto style consensus where parties essentially participate in a form of a lottery to win the right to append blocks to the chain. And of course, the probability with which they win the lottery depends on the stake that they have. But in the Nakamoto-style consensus, which you're probably familiar with from Bitcoin as well, where everything started off, the idea is that the chain is extended by these by participants, but sometimes there can be issues such as network delays and others that can lead to the chain forking. And the chain forking basically means that then one has to resolve how and which of the branches are to be considered the right branch of the blockchain. And this is often solved by using the longest chain rule. But this leads to the problem that you have to wait for a while until you have a chain of a certain arbitrary length so that you can consider that the main chain of the blockchain. This, of course, affects the user experience adversely as you're in a situation where you're waiting for a while until you have the transactions confirmed. To alleviate this issue, Concordium did a really innovative thing by introducing something called the finality layer on the blockchain, wherein there was a finalization committee that was responsible for periodically checking certain blocks as final, and then bakers would only be able to extend the chain past the last finalized blocks, and which then can never be rolled back. So this essentially meant that we had immediate fast finalization, which resulted in better UX. So that was the past. This came out a couple of years ago. Now then, to be in tune with the evolving blockchain landscape and to be ahead of the curve, we wanted to introduce the next innovation in the consensus layer. So we've taken it forward now with the ConcordiumBFT. So ConcordiumBFT was introduced with the goal of improving performance, scalability, and usability without compromising security, and to be at the cutting edge of blockchain technology in general. And in the end, what this essentially means is that we can maximize value to the projects that build on us. So yeah, ConcordiumBFT is essentially is a variant of the hot stuff consensus protocol, and the hot stuff is itself a kind of a BFT consensus algorithm, and we decided to go with this one because it suited our needs in terms of achieving the best performance and usability criteria that we had. So yeah, now with the introduction of this new consensus protocol on mainnet a couple of weeks ago, as I mentioned, we are seeing much faster block production, which then translates to faster finalization. And then also the throughput has been increased significantly. I'll talk about these metrics later on in the presentation. And there are also benefits for the validators who help to secure the network in terms of offering them better tools for managing their nodes, and also providing transparencies over how validators are performing. This is important so that delegators can do the delegation wisely. So yeah, with that, we'd like to now talk about how ConcordiumBFT works. And there's none better than Christian Matt, who was one of the key scientists in the team working on developing this protocol, to talk you through that. So I'll hand over the mic to Christian now.
Thank you. Yeah, and hi everyone. So I will now give you a very quick high-level overview of how the protocol works. As with the old one, or like most proof-of-stake blockchains, there's some lottery involved. This is depicted by this lottery ball symbol on the top, and there you have this list that the lottery is spitting out. That basically means that the lottery is determining the list of the validators to make the blocks, and the probability that you are chosen is also depending on your stake, right? So if you have twice as much stake, then you are twice as likely to be on the list. And once you have that list, the way the protocol works is that, as you see here, say this is the first validator that was chosen by the lottery. This validator will then just make a block and include all the transactions that are in the mempool in that block, and basically extend the current blockchain with this block. And then this block is sent over the peer-to-peer network to all the other validators, and they will then all look at this block and check whether it's a valid block, and the transactions are valid, and so on. And if they're happy, they will basically make a signature saying, I'm fine with this block, and again send this signature around. And if you can collect signatures that are from validators that together have at least 2/3 of the total stake, then you get something that we call a Chrome certificate, that was depicted by this logo with the thing on top of the block, right? It's a Chrome certificate. And once you have that, the next validator can basically use this Chrome certificate and also make a block and extend the previous chain, right? So this is how the process then continues. So here in the picture, you see here's now the second validator making another block. And to make that block, that's important, she here has to include this Chrome certificate. So she cannot just append this block anywhere, like you could in a Nakamoto-style consensus, where you could then get forks. But there's now basically no choice for her, because she needs this Chrome certificate. So she needs to basically extend this currently longest chain. And then it just continues, right? So you will also send this block now to all the other validators, and they will check it. And if they're happy and you get 2/3, then it just goes on and on. And that's basically it. That is how the protocol works in kind of normal conditions. If there's nothing extraordinary happening, it just continues like this. Right? And you see that is really simple and also very efficient, right? In particular, you see that here that the second validator is able to just make this block as soon as this Chrome certificate is there, right? There is no kind of probabilistic time that you have to wait or things like that. Just have this list of validators you can go through and just keep moving as fast as you get these certificates. Okay, so that's basically how it usually works, right? But it's not quite that simple in all cases, because it could also be that there's a faulty validator, right? I mean, it's important also in blockchain. It's easy to do something that works if everybody is honest and everything is fine, but we also want to have security and liveness if some people are not behaving correctly. And so that's what this slide here is about. So let's say this validator now is chosen to make the next block, but he's not doing it. Right? He's sleeping here, or maybe he's also malicious and he makes an invalid block. And now the other validators, they're sitting there and waiting, right? They don't know what to do. And also the next validator cannot just make a block, right? Because you need this Chrome certificate to make a block. So you cannot just keep going. So what will happen in this case, you don't want to wait forever. So at some point, these validators will basically have decided this is now a timeout event happening. So currently, this is set to 10 seconds. So after 10 seconds, if there's no block, then they will say, okay, that's enough. We don't think that a block is coming anymore. And then they will sign kind of a message saying this round timed out. And then you again collect basically signatures on this timeout from at least 2/3 of the stake. And once you have that, you now also get a certificate, but in this case, a timeout certificate, which basically means that 2/3 of the validators believe that there's no block in this round. And if you are now the next validator, you can also use this timeout certificate to move on. Right? So you don't have to wait forever for this Chrome certificate that will never come, but you can make the next block basically using this timeout certificate. In that sense, skipping the previous round where no block was made. And that's how basically it continues then. Now this block is, as usual, sent to all the validators, and they just check it, and it just continues as normal from this point. Okay, so now one question is, of course, also important. When can we consider a block final, right? So we discussed these Chrome certificates, but this is not yet enough to consider a block final. We also don't have kind of a special kind of finalization mechanism like we had in the previous consensus that Sharan was explaining, but the finality is basically built into the protocol and happens basically on the side automatically. And as you see here, the rule is rather simple. If you have two blocks from consecutive round that both have a Chrome certificate, then the first of the two is final, right? And that's it, right? So basically, under normal conditions, you will always have the second to the second last block is final always, right? And that's it, right? But what's important here is that it must be two consecutive rounds, right? So if there's a timeout in the middle, then you have to wait again for another round, right? Now you may be wondering, okay, why do we need this? Sounds a bit complicated, right? And we already have this Chrome certificate that 2/3 of the people agreed that this is a good block. So why is this not enough to consider it final? And for this, you have a example here. It's maybe a little bit technical, but just to understand why it's not completely trivial how this works. You can look at this scenario where we have here one block, and then there's this light blue block coming that extends the previous block regularly with a Chrome certificate. But then basically 10 seconds and you don't get a Chrome certificate on that block, right? In that case, the validators will sign this timeout message and you get a timeout certificate. And then the next validator will get this timeout certificate and make a block. And now, of course, not extending the light blue block, but a previous block, because there was a timeout on the light blue block and not a Chrome certificate. Right? So if this happens, we are basically skipping the light blue block, which means in particular, the light blue block cannot be considered final, right? Because you don't skip finalized blocks. Now you may also say, okay, but there's no Chrome certificate on the light blue block, so there's not a problem. But what can happen is that the Chrome certificate arrives later, right? So after you already have the timeout certificate, you still collect the last signatures that have been floating around. They have not arrived within the 10 seconds, so people did time out, but then afterwards, the Chrome certificate for the light blue block can still come in, which would mean in that case, the light blue block has a Chrome certificate, but it's still skipped, right? And that's why you cannot consider this finalized yet. But if you have this in two consecutive rounds, a Chrome certificate, then you can prove that this situation cannot happen. Yeah, and that's basically how finality works.
Thank you, Christian. I think that was a very nice explanation of how ConcordiumBFT works. if you have any questions or doubts regarding that, please feel free to send them through the several channels that we have, and we'll address them at the end of this session during the Q&A part. So now I'd like to switch to the other results that I said that we'll talk about in terms of how ConcordiumBFT has been faring. So here, before I get into that, I'd like to talk about what results we should be talking about in the first place. So that essentially brings me to the topic of what makes sense to measure, and this is the confirmation time that I want to dwell on a little bit. So confirmation time is essentially the amount of time that it takes for a transaction that is submitted to the network to become an immutable part of the blockchain. So to illustrate how that basically works in the case of ConcordiumBFT, please allow me to use the schematic here, where you have a transaction that is submitted after block A has been produced, and then this transaction now that's submitted becomes a part of the next block in the chain, which is block B, and then essentially, as Christian explained earlier, this block is validated by certain validators and issued a quorum certificate, and then once this quorum certificate has been issued, or while this is being issued, the next the block in the chain is being baked and is appended to block B. Now, when block C has been baked and its quorum certificate has also been issued, you have the finalization of the previous block, block B, as also Christian pointed out. So this is basically a two-chain rule where you have the second last block in the chain being considered final when they are in two consecutive rounds. So this essentially brings us to different vocabulary that is used in the industry to explain and to measure these different aspects. So firstly, there is block time. So block time is essentially the temporal separation that you have here between block B and C. And then you have a certain extra amount of time that it takes to gather the quorum certificate for block C, and this is a very small amount of time, on the, which is around 100 milliseconds. So the block time and the block finalization time are very similar. This block finalization time, however, is not a very useful metric in terms of judging the real-world performance of a blockchain, because it doesn't really quantify the user experience. And that is because there is an extra amount of time that the transaction that's submitted to the network has to wait before it's a part of block B. So there's an initial waiting time at the beginning that needs to be considered as well. And this is essentially what is then called the transaction confirmation time, or just confirmation time in short, which really captures what the user experiences from the time the message is submitted to the network to the point where it gets confirmed. And this is the waiting time for the transaction at the beginning is essentially half of the block time, and then you have the additional block finalization time, which when added up then give you the transaction confirmation time. So this is the real world metric to measure. So when you actually do a swap on a DEX, this is actually what you experience, the transaction confirmation time, and not just the block finalization time. So I think this is important to highlight, because in the blockchain industry in general, you have different vanity metrics that are used that don't really capture what is really happening. So with that said, I'd like to show you the main metrics. So block time right now on mainnet, if you go to our Block Explorer CCD scan, you'll see is around 2 seconds. So we are in an extremely competitive realm in terms of the block time right now. And I should mention that we've set the block time to 2 seconds. This is a parameter that we can actually change. We could be faster. We could even go down to the sub-second range, but we have chosen to go with 2 seconds because this currently offers us the optimal balance between user experience and the market requirements. Because otherwise, we'd end up just creating empty blocks, which ends up wasting disk space for node runners. But yeah, going forward, when the need arises, we can always ramp up the block time as well. So, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, so the block time then translates to a confirmation time of 3 seconds. So in general, it's around 1.5 times the block time. And then in internal tests, we've seen that the maximum TPS for this with this consensus mechanism is around 2000, which also puts us in a very nice and competitive realm in the blockchain space. So so and then another thing to mention here is the discussion around TPS and confirmation time. So TPS or max TPS you see being mentioned a lot. So there are chains that advertise max TPS of over 100,000, but it's important to keep in mind that the max TPS is only a relevant metric when you have the network being saturated, because otherwise the full bandwidth is not being used and it doesn't really matter what the max TPS is. And also it often really is important how the TPS is measured as well. So what matters in the end is the confirmation time. This is what affects the user experience. So and in terms of like where we stand, so here's a quick comparison of where Concordium's block time is when compared to the other top layer 1 blockchains out there. As you can see, we fare really, really well. It's just Solana and Near that is faster in terms of block time. And as I said, we could also lower the block time even further by just changing a parameter. So we always have that option going forward. And the block time, of course, also translates to fast confirmation times. And here you can see Concordium's confirmation time is also very fast. This enables us to now offer a whole range of new projects to be able to build meaningful things on our blockchain. So that mentioned, so those were the performance metrics. And what's also nice about Concordium BFT is that it offers benefits for validators in terms of how they can manage their nodes. So now with Concordium BFT, you can actually see when your turn is coming up. And by knowing when your turn is coming up, you can ensure that you don't miss a software update or that your node is offline, and hence you can be sure that you don't miss out on any block rewards. And also for validators and for delegators, the nice thing is that the node quality of the quality of the nodes on the network in general improves significantly because there is transparency over how validators are performing. So CCD scan will have a display where you can see which nodes have been performing, how they've been basically performing over the past certain time, and that enables delegators to choose which validators they want to delegate the stake to. So this basically enables the network to increase its TVL and and also the quality of the nodes in general goes up because if you're not performing well, it's transparent and everybody can see it, and the only way you can do well is by upping your game. So those were the benefits there. And as the last slide in this presentation, I just wanted to show a comparison of the previous consensus layer that we had, the dual layer consensus, and the current one, Concordium BFT. So the first main difference is that we have deterministic block time as opposed to probabilistic block time. Christian mentioned why this was the case. So this essentially translates to how the confirmation time affects the user. So now you have more predictable and deterministic confirmation times as a consequence of the block time being also deterministic here. And another difference is the validation roles. So you must have noticed that Christian and I used the terms validator instead of bakers and finalizers as we have done in the past in Concordium. And that is because there are some tokenomics changes that are coming up where we have decided to consolidate the role of the baker and the finalizer into one role, the validator. This discussion is out of scope for this live event. This will be talked about very soon, so please bear with us with your questions regarding the tokenomics for another event. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there is the transparency over which bakers which validators are coming up in the queue, which again facilitates better validator management and performance transparency over how they are faring. And of course, the stats that I mentioned. So, ConcordiumBFT has shown us that it's much faster than what we had before. So we see like a 5x improvement in the max TPS, a 5x decrease in the block time, and that the confirmation time is now down to 3 seconds as well. So, so it's really exciting that we've been able to pull this off in a very seamless manner without any glitches. This was our update about ConcordiumBFT. Now, I think we can dive into the questions. Okay, so I think we have received some questions. So, Christian, do you want to get started?
Yes. The first question is, what kind of security measures are in place to protect the network against potential attacks? So I can also answer this question, right? So this is not specifically about the ConcordiumBFT, right? But everything we do here at Concordium also, security is very important for us. And that's true for the consensus, but also for the ID layer and for other things. And that's also why we have a strong science team internally that looks at these things. And in particular, for the consensus, we have chosen a protocol that is provably secure and also checked the math to make sure that it is secure under the usual assumptions, which in this case mean that you need to assume that less than a third of the stake is controlled by corrupted parties. And if you have that, and also we looked at the network conditions and things like that, because probably beyond the scope of this question to discuss this in detail. But I mean, in short, right, we just look at the theory behind different protocols, and we have people that make sure that we only do things that are very solid. I can also take the second question. This is, how does ConcordiumBFT compare to other consensus mechanisms like proof of work and proof of stake in terms of energy efficiency and scalability? ConcordiumBFT is a proof of stake protocol. So it's basically a subclass of proof of stake. And in terms of energy efficiency, proof of stake in general is extremely efficient compared to proof of work. And that's why also Ethereum now changed to proof of stake. So this is very efficient, right? And also among the proof of stake ones, we believe that the ConcordiumBFT is also among the most efficient ones. You also saw it's very simple, the protocol. In the normal case, there's not much overhead to be done. People just make the blocks and then send the signature around. So there is not much energy wasted. And in terms of scalability, we also believe that this is one of the most scalable protocols. That's why we have chosen it. So I mean, we didn't just do this randomly, but we put in a lot of effort beforehand to research what's the best protocol, and we believe this is among the best. And you also saw it in the metrics that Sharan was showing, that we are very competitive, and we can improve this further and are still investigating how to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I think I'll take the next one. So next question is, what are the potential implications? What are the advantages of validators in the ConcordiumBFT network and network? So I think this is what I explained in one of the slides earlier, where I showed that validators have a lot of benefit from this consensus, because they're able to see when the turn is coming up, and then hence they can ensure that they are running the latest node software, and that they're not offline, so that they can actually receive their block rewards. So that's the primary advantage. So I think that's important to mention. And then in terms of what are the potential implications of ConcordiumBFT on the broader blockchain ecosystem, here again, it's basically that we are ahead of the curve in terms of what we're building. So we've tried to bring something that is a consensus protocol that's extremely secure while offering great usability as well in terms of the confirmation time that I was mentioning earlier. So this basically means that blockchain now can actually be used for several use cases such as gaming and for settlement, cross-border settlements, payments, etc., where it's important that the transactions are confirmed as fast as possible. The next question is, okay, I think I'll take this, Christian. Are there any upcoming upgrades or developments in ConcordiumBFT that we should be aware of? So yeah, well, in general, we'll be fine-tuning ConcordiumBFT to ensure that it's even faster, is more secure. We'll be looking at ways of scaling further using other techniques. So yeah, that is definitely something that we have our eye on. And as I mentioned earlier, we can also improve the performance by decreasing the block time. So that's also an option that we have. Christian, perhaps the next one you can take.
Yes. So how does Concordium address privacy and anonymity concerns within its blockchain? So that's a very general question. And I mean, that has been very important for Concordium from the beginning. As you know, we have this ID layer, and there we use things like zero knowledge proofs and commitments and things like that to protect the privacy of the users. So this has always been very important, and this does not change now with this ConcordiumBFT. I mean, it's not really related to the consensus. It's mostly about the ID layer. We're basically using state-of-the-art cryptography to protect the privacy of users.
So yeah, the next question is, how can businesses or organizations benefit from using ConcordiumBFT for their operations? This again is the usability aspect of the blockchain that is improved by using ConcordiumBFT. So the confirmation time is much better. So as I said, this enables use cases where you can't have a delay and rollback once messages are submitted to the network. And then also, we have a much higher throughput as well now. So use cases that require much higher TPSs will also be supported by ConcordiumBFT. Yeah, I think we have time for one more question. So yeah, Christian, would you like to take that?
Sure. I mean, does the lottery waste electricity like the Bitcoin, Hashcash, partial brute force? No, is the answer. I mean, this was mentioned. I think the second question was also about the energy efficiency. I mean, we are a proof of stake blockchain, which is extremely efficient in terms of the energy. And I mean, to talk more about the lottery specifically, the way it works is rather simple, right? You basically just need to produce this list of bakers. And the way this needs to be done is that, say, if you have 10% of the stake among all the validators, there should be a 10% probability that you are chosen as the next validator on this list. Right? So that's basically how it works. So the only challenge there is how you generate this randomness. And that's probably for a video in itself to do that, because that's not super easy, but we basically use things like these verifiable random functions and hashing techniques where people include some nonces in the blocks they are baking, and then at the end of an epoch, which is 1 hour, people are hashing this together, which gives you a random value, and then this you can use basically as a seed to compute these random things. Right? But this is all very efficient, and so the validators themselves don't need to do anything like in Bitcoin, where they try to hash things. Right? It's just once you have the randomness, you evaluate this simple function, and this tells you, okay, this is the next baker, and that's it.
Okay, so I think we're out of time now, so we can conclude the live event. So I hope you've learned something about ConcordiumBFT. We'll have some written content going out as well, which talks about the benefits of ConcordiumBFT as well as how it works. I should also mention that our white paper has been also recently updated with a section explaining ConcordiumBFT, so please feel free to have a look there. Besides that, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.